Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today in our panel discussions. We're going to kick off today discussing a little bit about how you can future-proof your business through balancing both your personal wealth and business growth. So I'm delighted today to welcome a great group of speakers. But before I do, I just want to advise you that this presentation is provided for informational purposes only. The content of this presentation doesn't substitute financial advice, and so anything we talk about today is just in general. And if you need further advice from anyone, we suggest you reach out to either an accountant or a financial advisor for that individual advice. So let's kick off today. What we're going to be covering today is the whole idea around that importance of wealth creation for businesses here in New Zealand, how your business kind of fits into your overall wealth plan, and why it's really important that it remains profitable. We'll touch on a little bit about the right tax strategies and a little bit around insurance, and obviously the real importance for preparing for your retirement and creating that exit strategy from your business. So what I'd love to do is kick off by introducing the panelists that I have with me here today. First off, we are joined by Dianne Barlow. And so Dianne
Good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks, Di. So Di is both a qualified financial advisor and a chartered accountant, and has been a business owner herself. And so with over a decade's worth of experience helping clients at Enable Me, I think you've got a lot of advice that you can kind of help those that are attending today. So thanks, Di. The next person that's joining us today is Catriona Knapp. So hello, Catriona.
Hi, how are you?
Great. And so Catriona also a huge wealth of experience with over 20 years as a chartered accountant and business advisor. And Catriona, I know that you've got a huge amount of passion for helping businesses become profitable and grow, and also work with the owners around potential exit strategies. And thank you. And lastly, going to be joined by Justin Gauci. And so afternoon to you too, Justin.
Hi, Carla. Thanks for having me.
Great. And so Justin is also a qualified financial advisor with a wealth of experience in business analyst work, and has worked with a lot of businesses in terms of looking at how they analyze their performance. And you've also worked with a large number of self-employed clients here as your role as a financial advisor at Enable Me. So, wow, talk about a power-packed team of experience of working with people on their businesses and looking at ways that they can kind of leverage and grow. So, I mean, a lot of what we want to talk about today is that a lot of what we're doing is obviously helping people kind of prepare for the long game and sort of thinking about, we talk a lot at Enable Me about the importance of wealth creation and how we really want to think about how you can kind of build and establish yourself for that ultimate end goal of having a really great and settled retirement. And we want to consider ways that you can kind of set yourself up for the future. And so for a lot of people, that's about buying a home, paying that home off. People might think about their KiwiSaver, their managed funds. They also might consider investing in things like property. But for the people that are joining us today, their business is a really key strategy for them to get ahead. And we want to talk a little bit today about how your business might not just be what you're using to fund your income, but it could also provide the opportunity for you to get ahead and provide that nest egg for the future. But there's a lot of considerations, and we've got to make sure that we're doing it in the right way. As you'll know, if you've attended any of our other webinars or seen any of our materials, we're all about having a plan here. And I think, you know, that's what you'll hear us kind of touch on quite a bit today. So look, I'm going to kick off by firstly sort of asking Catriona, obviously, you know, it's coming to the time of year where people start thinking about all of their end of year financials, but like when you're owning a small business, what are some of the areas that you kind of encourage people to be focusing on in terms of how their business is performing and that overall profitability?
Well, it all comes down to revenue. There's not really any surprise there.
Yeah.
I guess probably the key thing is people understanding where their revenue comes from and where the potential to earn more revenue is, and where you fit within the competition as well. So is there things that you do or you think you do better than other people? Have you got a particular area of the market that you can capitalize on? And I think at this time of year, it's about people thinking about what's gone well for the last year and what's not gone so well. So then we can put in place that plan of how we're going to capitalize on the year ahead. And not only that, sometimes it's worthwhile thinking, okay, if I wanted a little bit more money out of the business, what have I got to do? You know, I mean, obviously, yes, we want to sell more, we want to, you know, sell more services, products, whatever it is that we do. But what about if we lift prices a little bit? You know, so some of these strategic points need to start being thought about at the moment as well. So if I lift my prices by 1%, 5%, would any of my customers have noticed? Would it mean that they would go somewhere else? So that's something. And if I do that, then that's going to go straight to my bottom line, which I can then use to pay off debt or enhance my personal wealth or those sorts of things. I think the other overarching thing is about what's the strategy, like you touched on. So what do I want to achieve? Because obviously somebody that's wanting to build wealth and extract a lot more money out of the business might be more inclined to focus on maybe what we can do to have less tax. So what do we need to push through the business at this point in time to make it more efficient? Versus if I'm looking to sell the business in the next 3 years, I might be wanting to do things slightly differently to make the business books look a lot better. So those are all sorts of things that I think need to be thought about all of the time, but also at this time of the year when planning is important as well.
Yeah, so you've touched a lot on the cash flow side there, and what the business is bringing in. But what about the expense control side and like your debtors and where does that sit in the mix in terms of focusing on that success for the business as well?
Well, debtors is obviously something that you should be looking at all of the time on a weekly basis, and understanding who owes you money and who's slow to pay you, because they're the people that you're going to want to charge more to in the future or maybe not work for at all. So I think that debtors question and point all hinges around cash flow. So you got to have the sales first and foremost to have the debt that's owing. But like you also mentioned, in terms of cost, it is a matter of reviewing costs and saying, well, am I spending too much on certain things? Can I get discounts? But also looking at costs and saying, well, am I pushing too much through the business? You know, are there things that are actually really personal costs and I should be paying for them out of what effectively is my wage out of the business, as opposed to having it through the business? And like I mentioned before, sometimes the focus is to minimize tax so that you have more available to put towards paying off debt. But you don't want to do that and put the business in a risk point of view as well from the IRD side of things. So you've got to bear that in mind. And there is enhanced audit activity at the moment, so that is something to be mindful of. But it is actually saying, well, okay, do I put too much entertainment through the business? Do I put too much travel through the business? You know, what is effectively the cost of running the business versus personal costs that I'm pulling into the business? And I always say to people, if a cost is kind of more than 50% business related, then fine, put it through the business. And then obviously you then review it and say, well, is that a cost that I should be incurring? Should I be paying as much on that? And entertainment is a classic example of that one. Vehicles is another classic example of that one, where we all, well, a lot of us like to drive nice cars, but is that the right thing to be doing at the moment? And is that the right thing to be pushing through the business to that extent? Then the other thing is that if it's not, you know, if it's less than 50% business related, then my recommendation to people is always, well, that's actually more of a private cost. And that's a cost that should be coming out of your salary that you're pulling out of the business and not kind of overshadowing business results.
I think, look, that's really great. And that's a really nice segue across over to Justin and Di, because let's start with you, Di. Like, what are some of the mistakes that you see people make in regarding to managing their business and personal finances? Because obviously Catriona's talked about all of those things that you should look at, but as you've been working with some people, what are some of those challenges that you see as people sit with you and say, how do I work out how to get ahead?
Yeah, a lot of people don't take regular drawings, and I think that is the absolute start that they need to do, is transfer a regular amount into their personal bank account and then fund their lifestyle costs through that bank account. really important that they have clarity around how much their life costs. Otherwise, we can't project what's their retirement number or how quickly can they pay off their mortgage, etc. So it's not about pillaging the business, but we do need to understand, you know, if you take $1,500 a week, is that enough to fund your expenses? And then you've always got the ability to take a bit extra as dividends or extra drawings if required. But some people use the business as a bottomless pit, and not a good idea at all. You need clarity around exactly what Catriona said, how much cash flow the business can generate and how much really is fritter or personal costs.
Yeah. I suppose, and I'll just continue with you for a second, Di, but is there sometimes a risk that when you go through that process that someone may find that they can't do the drawings, so actually they could earn more being employed as opposed to being in a business?
Absolutely. Yeah. But without that clarity, it's hard to make those big decisions, and they are hard decisions. I had one client turning over 85,000 a year, and she told me she can only take 500 a week as drawings. Well, I'm thinking that's below minimum wage, you know. Really, there may be other reasons that she's in business for flexibility, etc. But from a financial point of view, it really wasn't working for what they wanted to achieve personally.
And so it's really important to set up that protocol of taking drawings so that you can be super analytical about the fact, can this, as we sort of touched on to start with, the first kind of priority with the business is it providing you an income that you could get in the market? And if it's not, do we know the reasons why? And secondly, you know, when we know the reasons, can we make the right decisions? I think also, Justin, I'm just going to jump over to you, but one of the things that people often kind of forget about as well is that there are some impacts around lending and things like that I think we should sort of touch on as well, and how you're impacted in your personal life when you blend too much into your business expenses. And
so like following on from what the other guys have said, if you are putting quite a lot through the business, you're lowering the business's profit. Okay, and quite often people will do that and sort of get into a bit of a trap thinking it's free money, okay, because it's just going through a business account. And what they don't realize, though, is the lower profits, that's how the bank actually looks at you for assessable income for future lending. So yes, you might have lowered some tax and maybe overspent as well. You might have had more wants being satisfied rather than the needs, because it doesn't feel real, the money that's being spent. But when those profits lower, it's just like having a lower assessable income. If you're a PAYE person, the bank's going to lend, you know, look at your income and expenditure. But if you're putting through that, let's make ourselves look like we're only earning 40 to 50K and we'll put 10, 20K worth of travel through the business that was a bit of holiday spend in there, the bank's going to lend less to you. And that might hold you back by, you know, a lot in terms of your wealth creation strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a really important consideration. So
I just think too, sorry, Carla, one of the key considerations I think is that in order to get the most out of everything, you need to evaluate. You know, Enable Me work really well in evaluating. Okay, let's look at our personal spending and let's get that under control. If you're going to make the most out of your business and have your business operating in the best way possible, you do the same with your business as well. So even though you might be flushing these costs through the business, like we've talked about, and like we say that there is a downside in terms of lending, there's also a downside in terms of your business performance too.
Exactly.
And, is it actually going as well as what it could be? So it's about fine-tuning both of them, really.
Yeah, and I think if you do blend that, it's so much harder to measure how the business is going and how you're going on your personal finances, because it's all intertwined in a bit of a mess. And sometimes you'll see it come through on your end, Catriona, where it's all a big jumble, and it's like, we don't know what your actually earning capabilities are. We don't know what your spending capabilities are. We don't know what your lending capabilities are, because all of these things are fully intertwined, and you're not getting the best out of any situation when you don't know where you're at.
You don't understand the true cost of running your business.
Yeah, and running the household.
And running the household hand in hand.
So then when the business stops and you've still got to run the household, if you've had lifestyle creep because the businesses kept covering these things, but then the business stops, those costs that were flushing through the business don't just turn off all of a sudden. And
No.
yeah, it's very hard to have a good financial plan for something if you don't really have a clear view of what it costs to run a household.
Which is kind of a really nice kind of dovetail into what I was going to ask next, which is what are some things business owners could do if they want to look at growing their business? And so, Catriona, sort of going to where you sort of started this, you know, accountability measures is something that you often talk to your clients about. Do you want to just touch on that a little bit and how that can kind of really help in terms of setting those in place?
Yeah, and I think on top of that, there's two key considerations. It's the old keep it simple, and it needs to be something that everyone can understand and monitor easily. So, you know, a lot of business people go down a pathway of having targets for Africa and taking a lot of time to monitor it, whereas often all you need is a weekly revenue target or a weekly chargeable hours target if you are running a bunch of staff and everyone needs to produce a certain number of chargeable hours for you to be able to meet your monthly targets, and that is a key thing that you monitor. And another thing might be, okay, we've got monthly revenue or weekly revenue targets that adds to a monthly sum of revenue, but we've also got an overall overhead number that we need to make sure that on a monthly basis we are sticking to, so our costs aren't going over that budgeted amount, which kind of flows back to what we've just been talking about. And then you'll roll it into, okay, well, people need to pay me on within 10 days, 20 days, whatever, and I'm monitoring that. So usually what you have in order to be effective is you've got weekly targets in terms of what am I selling, whether it's time or product, and is that meeting target? And then there's a couple of other things that you're adding in at the end of the month that you're monitoring as well. But I think the key thing is across any business is the target has got to mean something to you, and it's got to be something that you can easily track, like chargeable hours, like amount of money in the till, number of, you know, amount invoiced for the week, those sorts of things. Because if it's not something you can easily track, it's not something you can easily monitor, and so you're not going to be as effective.
And just one quick one to add to that too, for a lot of businesses, is also understand a little bit of seasonality that your business has. So don't just look at what you've done for the last year and divide it by 12 or divide it by 52. You know, if you're very quiet over winter, then you need to actually be hitting a lot more in the summer months. Okay, so yeah, making it actionable that you can easily keep track of, but make it relevant too, because if you do just take a simple approach of divide by 12, you're actually never going to hit that.
Very few businesses are linear, you know, so we tend to find that we're taking the annual target and we're dividing it by 10 or dividing it by 11 in terms of because you're always going to have an off month, and then you might be monitoring things quarterly, but you know, when you're all guns blazing, there's going to be certain targets that you need to meet, and then you're going to have other targets that might be more relevant when you're off season or it's not so busy for you. And it's about understanding those timings. But then you can challenge yourself one step further and say, well, how do I make some of these off-peak times peak? You know, and that's where particularly some service businesses start selling overseas, or when selling their services overseas, because that flows, well, you know, smooths out our seasonality here. But often that's the next step in the strategy chain.
That's fantastic advice. And Justin, we kind of touched on it a bit earlier around that real importance of pricing as well. And so, I mean, I know you've done some work in your previous roles around pricing, but even with some of your clients where they're kind of charging an hourly charge out rate, and sometimes it's working back, like, what do you need as an income? And what's that process that you go through when you kind of help clients discuss that sort of piece around pricing?
Yeah, look, it depends obviously on an individual basis for the business, but I guess for businesses that incur a lot of overheads, a lot of your costs have gone up, okay? And that's just a fact of inflation, the environment we've been in. So if you don't also do the same thing, your profits are going down. You're going backwards, or you're going to have to up the volume and have lower margins. So work harder, but be less profitable on a margin perspective. So it's understanding that is key for a lot of those businesses that do have overheads. For people potentially charging out hourly rates, some of the conversations I'll have there will be around them understanding what that looks like compared to if they were an employee. doing the same
Yeah.
role, where they do get 4 weeks annual leave. So, you know, they're planning in terms of how they're paid for a PAYE person. It is what it is, fortnightly or monthly. For somebody contracting that might have 6 weeks of shutdown over summer, there's zero coming in at those points. So for them to just really understand, well, what do you need to be on an hourly rate to pair or beat what your employee version of yourself would be getting, is the conversation for those. So they are a bit different depending on the type of business, if it's an hourly contractor or a business with high overheads.
I think that's fantastic advice, to actually kind of be really aware of like what your hourly kind of rate is in your business versus what you could earn in the market, to make sure that you are not undercutting yourself.
You need to basically take out 6 weeks, I would say, for a lot of people that are contracting. 4 weeks annual leave, 2 weeks sick leave, that you'll get zero, you know, unless that's sort of the rule of thumb.
You know, like you have to save for your tax, save for your GST, you've effectively got to save for your holidays, you know. So it is about knowing, okay, this is how much needs to be set aside so that I can still pay my bills when I am on holiday.
And I think you open up a bit of another can of worms sometimes with contractors, is save for tax. You know, the amount of times we've probably seen them just take that in and then get suddenly surprised that they've got a GST or a tax bill. And then they're not putting that aside. So same thing for your holidays, for those months where you're going to get nothing because you are away, maybe over summer or winter or whatever it is there. So you've got to plan for it in advance.
But I think also, further to your point around your hourly rate, you can use that exercise, and I do that a lot with clients, whereby you say, well, okay, if we want to put another $20,000 off on our mortgage a year, how many more hours do I have to do, or how much more do I have to bill at certain times in order to achieve that? So it's about reverse engineering it too. And often there's a little light bulb that comes on and people think, oh, I could actually do that, you know, or that's achievable, or it takes the conversation in a different direction, but it also opens up things that you wouldn't naturally think about unless you had viewed it from that point of view. If you have got staff, or the ability to perhaps expand a little bit more and challenge yourself, I think that's a good thing to do as well.
Yeah, because you extrapolate that stuff out, you know, hours, 30, 40 hours in a week times by 46 weeks, it can be worth tens of thousands of dollars of difference to a financial plan. And it might not be that much per hour. You know, it can actually make such a big impact. I think recently, actually, just on that point, where myself and another advisor had a client that just a small shift in asking what they're able to do on an hourly rate was the difference between them getting, I think, mortgage free in 10 or 11 years to getting it down to 7 years and buying an investment property at the same time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You know, that's the value of just a small tweak can actually have to an overall bigger picture over the next 10 years for that couple.
And it might be, like we talked about, 1% or 5% increase in prices, and, you know, being a little bit more efficient with your billing or those sorts of things. So it can be a combination of a couple of small things can make a huge difference.
They totally can. And Di, like we've talked about a lot of accounting metrics there. I was also going to just hand over to you, because obviously you've run your own business, and like there's that whole piece around branding and networking when you can kind of pull into clients that, and through referrals and collaboration, you can get access to other people at that lower cost point. What's some of the things that you suggest people look at?
Yeah, well, as a business owner, we need to keep our clients, and we need new clients, because there is natural attrition. So it's a constant battle to have an online presence, post, you know, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, depending on what's appropriate for your business.
Yeah.
And people love reading about client stories and getting a little insight of who you are and your values, etc. So I think the social media is important. Networking is another great way to go, and that can help with collaboration. I was in the T&G networking group, and there was a real estate, a mortgage advisor, and a lawyer, and they all got together one evening and got their clients. And also, once you get to know people, you're kind of happy to share your valued clients with them when, you know, once you sound them out a little bit. What else is there? And referrals. Asking for referrals. We forget about that. But so important, say to clients, you know, have you got any friends or family that need help? I'd love to help them.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be very, oh, give them a ring today or anything, put people on the spot, but ask.
But having those clients that you can, there's a lot more cost in terms of finding clients. So if you've got people that are going to refer clients to you, or you've got clients, I had the privilege of speaking to one of Dianne's clients yesterday who's been with her for 10 years. The value in retaining those clients for the long journey is immense to any business owner. So in terms of when we then look at options to then kind of grow and protect that wealth, there's a number of things that we have to consider. And Catriona, people are obviously always interested in things around tax and what they can do with their profits and their dividends. Tax is obviously something that Justin and Di have seen people run into some complications with if they don't account for it. What are some of the things that people should start to consider as they're managing their business, particularly as we look at, you know, financial year ends and things like that?
Well, that can go across a number of different facets, but I guess probably starting from a very simple thing, and I guess dovetailing back to what we talked about earlier and what Dianne mentioned with taking a set amount out of the business every month or every fortnight. I try and encourage a lot of my clients to put themselves on a PAYE salary out of the business, because that means that their monthly amount that they need out of the business is taken care of from a tax point of view. Because if you're on a PAYE salary, then you're getting a set amount and the PAYE is getting paid to the IRD monthly. So that takes away your personal tax problem, and it takes away having to pay those big lumps in provisional tax 3 times a year, often when you don't have the money. And some people say, oh, you know, they're a bit worried about committing to a certain amount a month. But if things got dire, you could all of a sudden say, well, we just won't pay ourselves officially this month, but at least for the other 11 months of the year you have. And I guess further to that, when you're going to a bank and you're looking at lending, if you've got a set amount a month that you can show that is coming out of your business all of the time, then that looks good from a banking point of view as well. So that can take care of that side. Obviously, on a company side, we really encourage people to have a monthly savings amount that they're putting away, so that they're saving the GST that they're receiving from their customers when they get paid. They're also saving a little bit on top of that for tax. So usually for our clients, we'll work out what that amount should be. So we'll give them a percentage of the amount that they get paid every month that they should be saving. Because obviously, depending on your cost structure as to how much extra you should be putting aside for tax, because a business with more cost isn't going to have to save, let's say, the full 30% or 28% in tax. You might be able to save 15, 20%. So that side of things, you know, we find is really important as well. Obviously, like we've all also talked on, there are some expenses that you can put through the business to save yourself tax, but you've got to do that with the caveat around it saying, well, we know that we've got a certain amount of private costs that are going through, and like Justin mentioned, when the business is not there, we're going to have to be able to pay for those. We also need to bear in mind that if we're going to sell the business in a few years' time, we want to change and not do that, because we want to make the books look as good as they possibly can. So there's a time and a place for some of these things, and I think overall it's about understanding your strategy and what it is you're trying to achieve. The dividend payment issue is a really good one as well, because if you've got retained profit in a business, or the business is making profit, then there's certain times of the year where it may be good to pay out a dividend, and that becomes money that the company owes you. That can coincide with a loan coming off its fixed term, and you may be able to put some of that loan under the name of the business, because the business owes you this money. You know, you declare a dividend, the business owes you $20,000, $50,000. It doesn't have the cash to pay for that usually, because that cash is tied up in working capital and keeping their home fires burning with cost. But it does mean that the business can take on $50,000 of your personal debt, so then the interest on that becomes tax deductible. So the timing around those sorts of things is really important as well. And I find that that's a window that people don't tend to use, they don't tend to think about. So it's certainly worth bearing in mind.
So really, I take away 2 points from that, Catriona, which is that having a plan, like there's a lot of variability in any business, but having a plan that you're working towards makes a big difference, because you can plan a tax strategy and you can plan a strategy for your hopeful profits. We won't say inevitable because you never know what's going to happen, but that plan is very, very important. And having a longer term plan around your, like a 3 and a 5 year plan really helps, because that allows a plan for what you're going to do around assets, etc. Because otherwise you're having to pay back the GST on your vehicles and all of those sorts of things if you get your timings wrong. So that plan is really important. And second, working with like trusted people in terms of your accountants and your advisors in that planning process really can aid you in terms of maximizing your opportunities to kind of leverage and make the most advantages in that process. So I think there's a lot to be taken away from that. The other thing I was just going to touch,
structure your debt in a really smart way.
Yeah.
And if your accountant's working with you on that can really help, and it can really help you bring down your personal debt a lot quicker.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's really interesting, is that what you're really highlighting is the benefits of kind of having a dual strategy where you're kind of working. And I know that's where we work a lot with McQueen and Associates. Of, it's great when there's an accounting firm that's partnering with a personal finance side, because we're working the two sides of the debt hand in hand to basically help grow your overall wealth strategy. The other thing I was just going to touch on briefly, and I know none of us here are insurance advisors, but just touching on a little bit around personal insurances and just the sort of thought process around, sometimes that's one of those things that gets forgotten about in the process. We'll come to KiwiSaver as well, but there are certain things that when you're running a business, and many of the people we talk to are sole traders, and we've sort of touched on the fact that that's 6 weeks, and like you need to account for your sick leave. But just touching on a little bit, and I'll talk to you, Di and Justin, about it, but the importance of kind of thinking about risk protection in case anything happens to you in your earning capacity for your business. Justin, maybe I'll start with you. Like, do you want to just touch on that in your discussions with clients?
Yeah, and it's not too dissimilar to non-self-employed clients.
Correct.
Really. It's, are you going to still be able to meet your obligations if you're unable to bring the money in? Okay,
Yeah.
and whether that's income protection or different things that could be in the market there, it's vital in terms of our financial planning that we know the money in and the money out. Okay, and there's a little bit of variability in some of that, but you've got to de-risk that strategy. If something was to happen and there's insurance costs to incur, it's got to be for something for a good reason, and that's to protect that money inside of the formula. So that's probably the big one, is understanding that. And then obviously who pays, whether it's the business or personal, is more a Catriona question, but it's vital. Coming back to everything here, it's around having plans, and you're the biggest asset, really. We insure cars, we insure our contents. These things are worth, a few thousands of dollars, but in terms of financial plan, if you're on 100K and you're going to be working for the next 10 or 20 years, you're worth millions. So why are you not insuring yourself something worth that much, but you're insuring golf clubs or a jet ski? Like that's how I sort of break it down for some clients.
Di, you were going to add something.
Yeah, also we must remember that some businesses are family businesses. So it might be a plumber with a guy or two, and the wife is doing all the administration. So they are quite vulnerable if he is unable to work, if he has an accident or something.
Yeah. So look, definitely, if you feel like you need some advice in that area, please reach out to us, because it's a very specialist area, but I think we'd be remiss not to kind of cover it, because obviously anyone that's in business knows they've got obligations under ACC. But the thing is with ACC, of course, is it only covers you for accidents, and we know that there is a lot of other stuff that can happen, and protecting your overall wealth is something that we should be really mindful of. And so it's something that's important. So
Carla, just one quick last one on the insurance piece is there are going to be also some businesses that might have like public liabilities and stuff, and probably coming back to repeating a similar message is working with experts to know what you need to be covered for in certain spaces, or your tax obligations is super vital. It's not an area that I'm going to talk too much about, but there are definitely some businesses that your business's ongoing concern could be at jeopardy if you don't have the business insured for certain things too. So what we really were talking about there is you and you being able to draw an income, but the business on those protection pieces, again, probably talk to experts and make sure you're safe there.
Thank you, Justin. That's really poignant. So we obviously set out with this webinar to kind of talk about like how we balance that personal wealth and business growth, and also like how we can future-proof your business. But ultimately, we're all on this journey to prepare for not working and for wrapping up businesses and for wrapping up working in general. And so one of the things we want to kind of think about when we're owning a business is how do we still ensure that we're preparing for our retirement and the looking forward. So one of the things that we're acutely aware of is when you're in business, the piece around KiwiSaver. So you're obviously not in the same situation as an employee in terms of your employer. You are your employer in terms of the KiwiSaver contributions. So Di, with your clients that are self-employed, what are you finding most of them are doing with their KiwiSaver in terms of making the contribution to at least get the government?
The idea really is to put the minimum into KiwiSaver to get the maximum benefits. So if you're self-employed, you would put in $1,042 a year before June each year to get the $521 government contribution. If you're on wage and on a PAYE system through the business, you could opt out and then voluntarily do that. But sometimes there might be partners and everyone wants to be on an equal footing. So it does depend. But the reason why we don't want a lot in KiwiSaver, because it is tied up till 65, we would prefer you have a bit more flexibility around when you could access funds.
But as you said, there's no reason why you don't at least want to get that contribution that's just sitting on the table. So we want to make sure that I'm hoping that nobody out there forgets to get their government contribution. But come July, you want to make sure that you've got your $1,042 in there so that you're going to get that piece back. It's not a big part of our strategy, but
you'd be surprised, how many don't do it as well. So it's a 50% return on investment.
Correct.
It's as good as anything out there.
Correct. Exactly. So then I guess it more comes to, and we sort of touched on it a little bit, but the things that you should be thinking about when it comes to exiting your business, or sometimes that might be sale, that might be what's that sort of strategy in terms of your business. Catriona, you obviously have worked with a number of businesses that have gone through an exit strategy, and for some it's a wind down as well. So what's your overall advice in that space? You touched on it a little bit before about how you sort of treat the business as you're working towards a wind up and those sorts of things.
Well, I think the overall advice with that is plan. I've family friends of ours came across, they had a great business, but all of a sudden he decided he wanted to retire and there was no one to buy the business. And had he thought about that 3 or 5 years prior, he would have got a lot more for his business than what he did, which was a shame because he'd spent his entire working life working on and building that business. So I think the key thing is plan and think about the exit. And not only that, think about who you might be exiting or selling to. Because in some cases, there are things that you can do which can make your business more attractive to a target if you identify the target. And that is if it's a bigger business, or if you've got a particular niche in the market, or if there's someone that you think that may want to buy it, that you do what they don't do, then you need to do more of that so that you're more attractive for them. So like I say, overall, it's a planning thing. And that's not just planning to make the business look good, the numbers and so on, because at that point you want to be very careful about, like we mentioned before, the expenses that you flow through. But it also goes further than that, and it is the debtor management, it is how much you pay yourself, because anyone looking at a business wants to take on something that not only can pay themselves a wage, but generate some profit so that they get the money that they've put in buying the business back as soon as possible.
Correct.
You know, other considerations out there are staffing as well, because if you're wanting to sell a business and you've got a good team, then how transferable are these people into a new owner? You know, is it about the loyalty to you? Is it about the loyalty to the business? Are there people in the business that might want to buy it off you? In which case, there's a staged approach that can be taken with that as well. So again, I can't emphasize that planning aspect enough, and that all then dovetails back to how you manage the business, not only the revenue side, but the cost side as well, and also how much debt you've got in the business too. So, I mean, that's another aspect that we haven't really touched on today, but it is that level of debt, because when times get tough, if you've got a business that's got a lot on finance, like a lot of vehicles on finance, a lot of debt in the business, then those monthly commitments really are quite large, and a lot larger than just meeting your salary cost and the business costs alone. So for a lot of businesses that are setting up, often it's being smart around the level of finance that they do and how they do things like vehicle finance and those sorts of things. Because I see people put their own money into a business to, let's say, buy a vehicle instead of getting finance and keeping that money in case they need it to inject into the business if times are tough. You know,
that's really great advice.
There's also things on the tax planning side as well, where, you know, do we pay the IRD now, or do we use tax pooling agencies to keep our cash flow as consistent as possible? So there's a lot. We've dovetailed away from the planning for sale, sorry, but
no, I think that's great.
All of these things kind of come back to how you run the business, because that's what makes it attractive to people looking at it.
No, I think that's excellent. And you've obviously worked with lots of clients over, a prolonged period. And have you got any advice, as you've kind of seen some people exit businesses and kind of prepared for that journey of going into retirement or to do other things?
Yes, I think it comes down to the planning, like Catriona said, and it's picking your time to exit, thinking about, is there someone already in the business that would like to take it over? You know, as you said, with staged approach, that could be quite a good way.
Justin, I think
Catriona's covered most of it.
She has. And I think, Justin, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I think it is important to kind of have that conversation again, which is that sometimes, I know you've had the conversation where you make the choice of, is it being in the business or is it going back to being an employee, because that is for your overall wealth creation and for where you want to go, the best possible strategy.
Yeah, I think for some clients I can think of who have been in this situation, having that conversation, understanding what they earn, have they pulled all the levers they can within that business, and for some people they're putting in hours and hours of work, and when you actually divide that out to be an hourly wage, they hear it and they don't actually realize how low it is in comparison. So there can be some conversations that get to there, but before it gets to that, we've got to understand, have we pulled all the levers we can to grow the business to the best version of itself? Something I'd say to clients, even at a PAYE level, get to the best version of yourself or your business, then assess what it's going to be doing longer term. Is it something you want to, is it getting enough out of it for you to still enjoy being a business owner with the stress and hours that are involved in that? If it is, great, then we'll make a plan off that. Or we might pivot into doing something differently if we've done everything that we could, and it's not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, I guess.
Yeah.
I think what I've found is that some people that think we're just going to have to wind down the business, when you actually turn it around and say, well, what would you have to change now if you were going to sell it to somebody? And that's worth considering as well. Like in most businesses, there is value, and that value can be transferred to somebody else. But sometimes you actually, again, have to plan for that. You have to make the business less about you and more about what the services or the products that it sells are. And that can take time as well. But You know, I have a number of conversations with people about saying, well, you know, you do have the ability to make this business about the business, not about you, so that you do end up with something to sell for a retirement plan, even if it's not a lot. You know, if you get 50,000, 100,000, that's still more than actually getting nothing.
Yeah. Look, Justin, Di, Catriona, I know we've only just touched the tip of the iceberg, but that has absolutely been fantastic. And I think you guys have given a lot of great information today for consideration. For those of you who've had the opportunity to attend or may watch subsequently, as you can see, Enable Me specialises in a lot of personal financial training and development plans, but we also work extensively with a lot of clients in that space who own businesses. And we've also had the privilege of working with Catriona and her team at McQueen and Associates, who also bring all of that accounting expertise and knowledge as well. And between the two sets of businesses, we actually work very collaboratively to support people in that space. So if we can do anything to support you on your journey, please, by all means, get in contact with us. We'd be delighted to start the process with a provisional conversation where we can look at where you are today and maybe sort of suggest some ideas about what would be ideal for the future. So on behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank our speakers today, and yeah, thank you very much for your time and your amazing insights, and we look forward to catching up with you all again soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you.